Hey channel, Fernando from HiFi Audio. If you follow our store, you'll notice that we don't carry a lot of brands. We sort of hardcore focus on what we like the best. That tends to be electronics from McIntosh, speakers from Klipsch, Technics turntables, and a few line of cartridges. So we don't have a huge lineup. For some time now, I've been looking to add an integrated amplifier that is tube powered. There aren't a lot on the market, or at least there aren't a lot of good ones on the market. So it took us quite a few iterations before we landed where we are today, which is, I'm proud to announce that we now carry the Japanese brand called Leben, or Leben, depends who you ask. It's a wonderful brand, handmade stuff from Japan, and the product line isn't very vast. There's 5, 6, 7 products in it, and we're going to be introducing them little by little. And I've got my hands here on the first piece, which is the CS-300XS. In this video, I'm going to unpack our first sample unit, and we are going to put it through its paces. We're going to connect it up to a system, probably the La Scalas, and then I'm going to move it over to Ben's bench. He's going to crack it open and show you how they're built and why these are above the standard. Now, as far as tube integrated amplifiers go, this is not a very high power unit. It does put out 15 watts per channel. The reason why we can get away with something that small is because of Klipsch. We absolutely love Klipsch speakers. The La Scalas, in my opinion, are some of the best speakers ever made. And the entire Heritage lineup is incredibly highly efficient, which means that in many cases we can use 4, 5, even 10 watts to drive them with authority and power. That efficiency number is measured in dBs. The higher it goes, the more efficient they are. The La Scalas, for example, are well over 100 dBs efficient. So are the Klipsch horns and the Cornwalls. And that's where the magic happens, in my opinion. I absolutely love the sound of a high efficiency speaker, usually fitted with horns and a tube amplifier. And that's where this beauty comes in. Before I go way too deep, this will be available on our website for pre-order. They're very hard to get a hold of. They take a long time to build because they are in fact hand-built. So if you decide you want one, I'd encourage you to consider us, or I'd really appreciate it if you consider us. You'd have to give us a call to discuss which model is right for you, and then we'd sort of put you on the list for the next production piece to come in. So it's a bit upside down, but this is what we're looking at here. US specific power cord, and the manual is a pretty simple printed affair, and it does have a catalog showing the other pieces, which I'll go through in this video. All right, I'm going to take this out off camera. Also want to give a shout out to the distributor for getting us this piece ahead of schedule so that we could experience the brand. I read somewhere that these side panels are Canadian ash, which looks a lot like a walnut. Looks about the same color and grain, so if you're not familiar with that species, the walnut is certainly something that comes to mind. Now, one of the things that attracted us to this brand was obviously its looks, as well as its electronic design, is really the aesthetic component. They're absolutely stunning pieces. I've always wanted to experience them. We've had a few in the past, and they also sold very quickly. I suspect that's because people don't generally want to wait months and months for their own piece. So anything that's ever come up in the pre-owned market just goes immediately. We've had this piece, we've had the phono preamp, and we're really impressed with them. So it's pretty compact in both height and shape. It does not have a phono section. That's important to note, so that if you have a turntable, there is a separate piece that partners with this one in order to support moving magnet cartridges. And then beyond that, if you want to use moving coil, you'll need a step-up transformer, which, as many people will tell you, is the right way to do moving coil. So here we are. It's got a beautiful green and gold faceplate. The knobs are substantial, and we'll talk more about the feel of this thing because it's really hard to convey on video, but it's one of the nicest feeling amplifiers, and for me that's important. A lot of audiophiles don't care, but It's sort of like when you go to a restaurant and you get a dish, you know, I sort of taste with my eyes as well as my mouth. So if something doesn't look good, I'm probably not going to think it tastes that great. And same with audio. I like it to sound amazing, but I also like it to look a certain way. And this really marries nicely with the Klipsch Heritage line. Those tend to be available in walnut and black and sort of traditional 1960s, 70s look, and this is just a perfect match to that. You'll see the top cover is finished in a sort of bronze color. It's got some black accents, and you can kind of see some of the key components throughout here. You can kind of see the output transformers on the left, power supply on the right, and the 4 vacuum tubes, and then the other tubes for the input stage. Fairly hefty for its size. That's a good sign of how much copper and build quality goes into it. And let me move the camera. We'll have a look at the controls closer up. When showing equipment, I like to start at the back because it kind of makes the front will end up making more sense if we start at the back. So again, the brass plated rear chassis. This unit is specific for 120 volts. So even though it's made in Japan, it's made for the American market, or at least wired in such way. IEC removable power cord. We've got our fuse here, and high quality WBT binding posts. These are super familiar to us. These take a banana and they take bare wire as well as a spade. Here's our impedance switch, 4, 6, and 8 ohms to match our speakers as much as we can. You'll notice there's a lack of 16, but 4, 6, and 8 tends to cover most of the market. The recording out, this is super cool. We sell quite a bit of tape decks here at Sci-Fi Audio, reel-to-reels, cassettes. They seem to be getting more and more popular as time goes by, so super nice to see a tape output. This is for recording essentially, whatever's being played on this machine. There'll be a non-variable output fed to a tape deck of some sort. Here's our ground lug. Not quite sure why it's there. We do not have a phono section, but perhaps this benefits from additional grounding. We'll have to report back on that. And then our inputs are pretty much all the same. We've got 2 lines, actually 4 line inputs, and then 1 labeled CD and 1 labeled tape. Interesting mix in an interesting order. But maybe that'll make more sense when we look at the front. Got some additional venting. All right, let's start with the left here. This is our source selector. So we've got the 4 line level inputs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1 labeled CD. So that's the selector job for the input. And notice there was a tape as well in the back. Yeah, at the bottom was the tape. And that one is selected through this toggle here. All right, we've got a volume control. It's not numbered in any way. It's just minimum to maximum. Then we've got a balance with a detent in the middle. Really easy to find. Very satisfying knob. Silky, silky smooth. We'll look inside and see why that is. Same for the volume. It's a pleasure. Bass boost in 3 and 5 dB increments. This is nice if you've got a smaller speaker. At low levels, sometimes you'd like to get a little bit more umph out of it, much like a loudness button, but just for the bass itself. Then we've got a headphone jack here, and the ability to select between the speaker output and your headphone output. So we'll look and see how the circuitry is treated on that when we open it up. Sorry about all the glare. And then on the right, we've got a toggle switch for the power. It's slightly protected. And then a rail LED, and not much else to it. All right, now let's crack it open, and then we'll bring it over to Ben to have a look inside. All right, now we've got it on Ben's bench. He's going to talk about a bit about first impressions, then flip it over and talk about the layout and circuitry, and then we're going to hook it up and do some sort of light measurements. All you, Ben.
So looking from the top, you can tell right away the design philosophy is based on simplicity. It's a very simple driver stage here. So it's a single 12AX7. They've got it marked 7025/ECC83. The 7025 is basically a mil-spec, higher quality version of a 12AX7. So I think they're broadcasting right off the bat. They want you to use a nice high quality 12AX7 in that position. That's going to be acting as a driver and a phase inverter to drive the EL84 output stage. And then from there, it goes to the output transformers, one for each channel. It looks like they're probably manufacturing or specifying their own transformers, very high quality. Underneath this is a nice touch. Let's see if we can get down an angle here. These are the resistors for the power supply, most likely. It looks like they've taken the time to hide that under there. So when you do open up the unit to change the tubes, there's not stuff dangling around in there. It all looks really nice. Nice beefy power transformer. On the controls, you can kind of see in here, these look like Alps controls. A very nice stepped attenuator here for the volume. And the balance control has a detent in the middle, so it stops right in the balance section there. On the back panel, we have a impedance selector switch. Did you already talk about that?
Yeah, I did.
So the nice thing about this is it avoids clutter on the back panel. So instead of having a bunch of jacks to plug into, we can just change the impedance. And what this is wired to is the taps on the output transformer. So it's just a different way to wire it to keep things simple. When you're dealing with a small chassis, you have limited real estate for connectors on the back. So right off the bat, this caught my eye. This transformer has a label on it for 120 volts, and I don't see multiple power transformer primaries. So it looks like this was designed to be region specific for North America. So that's just something for our customers to keep in mind, that if they're going to take this to Europe, they'd have to get a step down transformer. So this looks like it was designed for the US market primarily.
And what's your general sense when you see the first glance?
Oh, first impression is just somebody took a lot of care in the wiring. If you zoom in on these diodes for the power supply and the capacitors bypassing them, somebody just took a lot of time to bend these leads and just make everything look nice and tidy in here. And earlier we were talking about the simplicity of the topology here. We can see the driver and phase inverter tube and the output stage here. And one of the things that we like about this amplifier is it's what's called an auto-bias design, meaning you don't have to adjust the bias when you change tubes. The way that they pull this off is with an old school technique called cathode bias. So instead of using a adjustable negative voltage where you'd have to turn a trim pod and look at an LED or make a measurement, they just use a resistor on the cathode of each output tube. And there's a bypass capacitor here, and they're taking special care. This is a Nichicon audio grade capacitor, so they're selecting audio grade parts where they matter. There's also a lot of ELNA, like really high quality Japanese capacitors in the power supply. Yeah, what we like about the auto bias is if a tube fails or you want to do tube rolling, there's nothing you really have to do besides turn the unit off, wait for the power supply to drain, and replace the tubes and turn it back on. This circuit just takes care of everything. There's no adjustment that the end user has to do when you swap output tubes.
Yeah, tube roller's dream. And we've seen some pretty complex biasing systems on amplifiers over time. And just like McIntosh, this is a dream. Plug and play and off you go. No messing around with meters and LEDs and screwdrivers and high voltages. So this was one of the critical points in selecting an integrated amplifier for us. You want to talk about point-to-point versus PC board?
Sure. So point-to-point, it just makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot and diagnose. If this ever were to come back to us with an issue, I could diagnose it very quickly because you can just see everything. All the tube pins are visible. You can trace the wiring back to where it goes. So for long-term serviceability, point-to-point is the best. And a lot of times we can use bigger, higher quality components, where on a PCB you might be limited by size constraints. You see a lot of SMD parts. SMD parts are nice, they're very precise, but when you're talking about something that's a boutique audio design, I'm sure they took some care in picking specific resistors and different types, and without the size constraint you can kind of do whatever you want to do inside of a point-to-point design.
One thing that stands out to me is whenever we see point-to-point, or oftentimes it is a mess. It looks like essentially the person assembling the unit just chose the easiest path to get from point A to point B. Components everywhere in every single angle, every direction. And it just kind of discourages, repairs and speaks a lot about the design and the, how much care goes into it. And this is about as nice layout I've seen for point-to-point wiring.
Yep. Another thing that we can notice here is just the wiring is all laid right up against the chassis, and it's bent at 90-degree angles just to make everything look nice and clean and tidy. So they just did a really good job in assembly.
Okay, so can you point out like where's the power supply? What are our voltages?
So on the power transformer here, it looks like we have an independent filament. We've got one over here that looks like it goes straight to the output tubes, if I'm following this correctly. And then it looks like on this filament supply, it gets rectified, turned into DC, and that's feeding the driver tube. So it looks like we've got DC filtered filament for the driver section, and then raw AC for the output tubes. And that's great. That'll keep the noise down, having DC on the driver section there. So power transformer, this looks like all power supply related here, and driver and output section. And we see double of everything because this is a 2-channel amplifier.
All right, terrific. So let's plug this up and see what it does on the bench.
So we have this device connected to an 8-ohm dummy load up here, and we're able to monitor the output power directly on the needles. We'll also be looking at the output on the oscilloscope down here. I've got the volume control at around 45% or so. I'm going to feed in a test signal. We can see a sine wave on our left and right channel here, and right now we're making about, maybe 6 or 7 watts. I'm just going to raise the signal generator until we hit clipping. You can see the waveform starting to flat top here. I'm just going to bring it down till it's clean. And then if we look up at our meters, we'll see we're right around 10 watts. So we're a little bit under specification, but that's the nature of the beast sometimes. It's going to depend on mains voltage and things like that. But we do have a little over 10 watts, somewhere 10, 12 watts of output power here, which is, as we said earlier, plenty to drive the Klipsch Heritage line. I'm going to switch to a square wave here to look at another parameter. We wanted to look at the switch on the front that says bass boost. So right now it's in the 0 dB position. We can see we have very flat square wave response in a 1 kilohertz square. The little ringing that we see here is coming from the dummy load itself. It's not actually what this amplifier is making. I just want to change this and see the tilt here. So this is very similar to what happens when you engage a loudness circuit. So this is a way that you can get yourself a little bit more bass when listening at low volume levels. So it's kind of a nice feature there. If you're listening and you're a little bit bass shy, you have that ability to bring that in, especially at low levels.
So that's flat there, right?
This is flat. So this is in the 0 dB position. So when we have the bass control bypass, we have very flat frequency response.
And go to the other settings. So
that's plus 3 dB. Sorry, that's plus 3 dB, and that's giving us a little bit of a tilt. Let's look at this a different way that's a little bit easier to understand. I'm going to switch back to a sine wave. I'll overlay the channels here. So now we're looking at a 1 kilohertz sine wave, and I've got the amplitude set up so it's kind of right on these graticles here. Now if I take the frequency, right now we're in the 0 dB position. If I take the frequency and go down to 100 hertz, we'll see that the amplitude is basically the same. That's the flat frequency response. Now if I take the control and put it to plus 3 dB, we'll see that 100 hertz is going to get boosted. Right now I'm in the plus 3 dB. If I go down to 1 kilohertz for the frequency, this amplitude will come down. So what that control does is it just takes the lower frequencies progressively as they go down, and it just ramps them up so that you get a little bit more bass.
All right, let's look at the catalog consisting of 6 items. First on the list here is the CS-300F integrated amp, same output as the one we just tested, but utilizes the 6197 output tube and a 17E W8 first stage or line driver. Same power, about the same performance specifications, just a different kind of sound. The 300X is what we just tested. And then you move up to their biggest integrated amplifier, which is the CS-600X. Now this is 4 EL34s, which gives us cools 28 watts times 2. And quite a bit more features. This will be the next video we do. Flipping over, we've got their dedicated amplifier, which is the CS-1000P utilizing 4 KT120s and putting out 100 watts in pentode or 70 watts in triode. So if you don't have a high efficiency speaker, this is going to solve all the issues. RS28CX is their full featured preamp. So dual chassis, so power supply, then preamp. And then moving on to the RS30EQ, which we are familiar with, this is their phono preamp for moving magnet only. You would pair this with a step-up transformer if you had moving coil. That's it, pretty simple catalog. All right, now we're gonna hook this thing up. I've got my trusty La Scalas sitting just behind here. Connection should be pretty straightforward. These happen to be Kimber cable ATCs. Is one of our favorite speaker cables. Works really well with vintage stuff. And these are their WBT connectors, which are locking. For RCAs, I've got some Kimber cable Heroes. This is their sweet spot in terms of value and performance. I'm going to go right to line 1. And power cable is also from Kimber. All right, let's do some light listening now. Now guys, YouTube is no way to audition a piece of equipment of this caliber, but I thought I'd give you a sense of what it can sound like. Do get a chance, if you have a chance, to audition live in person, of course. So it's powered up. One thing I did notice is there are 2 lights here, which is kind of cool. This one is the main power, and then once it reaches operating status, this will turn red, meaning it's ready to go. Got everything pretty well neutralized. I'm hooked up to line 1. See volume about 33%, centered. I'm going to keep the bass boost at 0 for now. Obviously this needs to be on speakers, and this needs to be, tape monitoring needs to be off. For music, we're keeping it simple. I'm streaming Tidal. I'm going to do some Kenny Burrell here, some of my favorite tracks. I'm going to set the microphone back and give you a listen. playing around with the bass boost a little bit here, particularly on this track. It's just the right amount of bass. Going to 5 dB gives you what feels like another 5 hertz of low-end bass response. Let me see if we can catch this on the microphone. In particular, in a recording like this, where the frequency response was a bit compromised, you know, this is a pretty old recording, this kind of gives it a real nice just oomph. As you can see, we've got plenty of drive, plenty of watts. Again, this tested around just over 10 watts, which is twice more than you would need for a set of La Scalas at 104 dBs. High efficiency speakers can reveal a noise floor, essentially. If the amplifier itself has any sort of tube rush or sort of low-level hum, it'll show up in high efficiency speakers. There's just no way around it. They're so revealing and so sensitive that if the thing isn't brilliantly grounded and designed and the topology isn't just right, it's going to show up. You're going to be sitting in your listening spot, you're going to mute the song, and you're going to hear a low-level hiss. Well, it's unnoticeable on the 300. I don't hear a single thing. I can get right up to the horn with my ear, and it's dead quiet. So far, really nice results. I'm super pleased, and just look how amazing it looks together. All right, so that wraps it up. I hope this will give you sort of a bit of idea of what we've got here. I appreciate you watching, and you know, visit our website, skyfireaudio.com. If you want one of these pieces, do give me a call. I'm Fernando at extension 101. We'll get you on the list for the next incoming piece. And yeah, check out this craziness. Just visit us online. You'll see a lot of these pieces listed. There's tons of vintage McIntosh, Marantz, cello, you name it. So Fernando from HiFi Rose, I appreciate you watching.